Hello, my name is Jamie McMahon, and for my final report, I will be doing my research presentation on the life of Nathan Hale as a spy. I've entitled it Nathan Hale, a Martyr and American Hero. Nathan Hale, according to James Babcock, wrote the memoirs of Nathan Hale, was born June 6, 1755 in Coventry County, which is in Connecticut. Born to some very pious and very liberal parents. He would have been raised in the Puritan church and very strongly probably behind the American way of life as a liberal family. Charles Brown, who wrote Nathan Hale, the Martyr Spy, talked about his parents, Richard Hale and Elizabeth Strong. Nathan was the sixth of 12 children, a very large family, and he was a very sickly child. It was only later on that they actually realized that he was going to live and make it as a child. He was really not expected to survive at all. As he got older, he began to love outdoor sports. He was a hunter, a fisherman, a marksman, supposedly the fastest runner and the highest jumper in the entire county. His parents were extremely devout Puritans. They wanted Hale to be a minister. They wanted one of their sons to be a minister, and that was what they wanted for him. They began training him for that immediately. He was very, very intelligent, very diligent in his work. Went on to be admitted to Yale University at the age of 16. He was the youngest person to ever be admitted and graduated from Yale University at the age of 18. He was an excellent student, said to be popular with everyone. He was 6 foot tall and just said to be the perfect specimen. Once he graduated from Yale University, according to George Barton, who wrote a book, World's Greatest Military Spies, once he graduated from Yale University, he had some of the highest marks that he could have, and he began teaching school. He was teaching in New Haven, Connecticut, when the Revolution broke out. After the Revolution broke out in Lexington and Concord, supposedly he went down that night to a town meeting and stood up and spoke to the entire crowd, where he talked about Americans needing to do their duty. He immediately resigned his post as a teacher and joined as a volunteer in the Army. According to Raymond Danieli, who wrote The Revolutionary War Spy and Revolutionary War Hero as Traitor, when he gave his speech, people listened. He was the town schoolmaster, so people would have really taken what he said to heart. Really, it would have meant a lot to them what he had to say. He was very well respected, even though he was only 19 years old. He returned to school the next day, and he is said to have had prayer with each one of his students, as he knew that he was now going off to war. According to Gene Root, who wrote a book called Nathan Hale, his brother Enoch did going into the ministry, so his parents did get that child into the ministry, and Hale went into teaching. It is said that he was a wonderful teacher. His students described him as fair but a disciplinarian. He was loved by all of his students. Anne Pratt, who describes the 9 letters to Nathan Hale, talks about school teaching of the day. It's not like today. School teaching of the day was a building block. It was said to be something that was to lead on to something else, whether it be the ministry or into law or something like that. But in one of his resignation letters, when he was leaving one school to go into another, he wrote, "School teaching is a business of which I've always been fond. I have thought much of never quitting it, but with life." In other words, it was something he was considering to do the rest of his life. But obviously the Revolutionary War occurred, and he was a very hardy man and immediately joined up. Once in the military, according to Barton, which I mentioned earlier, he was quickly commissioned as a lieutenant and marched a regiment on the siege of Boston. Because of his great job in the military, within 3 months he had made the rank of captain. Everything seemed to be going pretty well, and then come along his opportunity. According to Hannah Adams, who wrote in early American imprints, Colonel Knowlton, who was his colonel during the Revolutionary War was told by General Washington to find info on the British at Long Island. He needed to find someone to go in and infiltrate the British to find out what their plans were, since the Americans had to flee and come from Long Island and had to evacuate. This was communicated to a few other people that were chosen first, but when it got to Nathan Hale, he immediately volunteered. Most people would think this was to get notoriety, to gain rank, but most people said that he believed that his country needed him. He wanted a chance to be a use to his country. He felt like he had fought all of this time and had never been any use to his country. According to A.S. Pratt and Nathan Hale memorabilia, he carried on in a very extensive correspondence with his brother and his classmates from Yale, and he showed just this extreme belief in the cause. And this was, in his opinion, his chance to be useful in the cause against the British. Henry Johnston, who wrote Nathan Hale, 1776, biography and memorabilia, actually provided a quote from Nathan Hale which says, "I am fully sensible of the consequences of discovery and capture in such a situation, but for a year I have attached to the army and have not rendered any material service while receiving a compensation for which I make no return. Yet I am not influenced by expectation of promotion or pecuniary reward. I wish to be useful, and every kind of service necessary to the public good becomes honorable by being necessary." That is what his goal was in this. Now, Daniele, who I talked about earlier, who wrote about Nathan Hale, says that he disguised himself and posed as a Dutch schoolmaster, entered into New York, and infiltrated the British, where he lived for 5 months. What's interesting about that is he was said to have powder burns all over his face, which should have been a red flag, but it wasn't. He was able to infiltrate the British for 5 months. On his return trip, he stays there. He's getting ready to come back, and he may have been recognized. He was approached, still according to Daniele, by a man by the name of Robert Rogers, who was actually worked for the British, but said that he was an American spy too. There's some speculation here that Hale may have had some to drink. No one really knows, but he met Rogers the next day at his house to talk more about this. Hale may have become a little loose-lipped at this time, and he was arrested that morning at the Rogers home. A lot of people said what drew attention to him was him asking people questions about how they felt about the revolution, about the Americans, trying to judge the sentiment of New Yorkers. Once he was captured, he was questioned, and William Howe, the general of the British Army at that area of New York, gave the order to execute him the next day. According to Robert E. Cray, Jr., who wrote The Revolutionary Spy as Hero, this was blamed for a long time on his cousin, Samuel Hale, who is a British loyalist. A lot of people believe that he may have actually turned in Nathan Hale, but there has never really been any kind of proof set on that. Nathan Hale, of course, was ordered to be executed. According to Mr. William Phipps, who wrote Nathan Hale, The Life and Death of America's First Spy, he was ordered to be hung. He was executed by hanging, and the British actually left his body hanging there for 3 days to show what happened to spies. According to George Dudley Seymour, who wrote Documentary Life of Nathan Hale, he asked before his death for writing materials. He wanted to write 2 letters. One to a family member, his brother Enoch, and another one to his commanding officer to let him know what was going on and what he wanted done. And he was given this, but according to Partridge, who wrote Nathan Hale, Ideal Patriot, the letters were destroyed because the British really wanted to cover up this story and really did not want anyone to know about Nathan Hale at the time. Now, according to Benson Lossing, who wrote The 2 Spies, Nathan Hale and John Andre, he describes the morning of the execution of Nathan Hale. He was led to the gallows, where a fresh dug grave was sitting right beside him. The noose was placed over a board, and as he walked to the top of the gallows, he was given the customary last rites of someone who is to be executed, and to give his last words, where he has supposedly uttered the words, "I regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." Whether Nathan Hale actually said those words, we may never really know, but that is what has been passed down through history, and that has actually been credited to Lossing for being the person who said that. Now, another author, Pennypacker, who wrote The Two Spies, Nathan Hale and Townsend, wrote that his death was actually reported later on by Captain Montesur, who was coming to talk to George Washington about a prisoner exchange. Word gets back to his family that Nathan Hale is dead, that he has been executed by the British, and obviously they are absolutely devastated. Not so much about the fact that their son had given his life, their brother had given his life for his country, but the manner in which he was treated by the British. To be hung in that way without a trial, and then to allow his body to hang there for 3 days in front of people, they saw it as a disgrace. In conclusion, what was Nathan Hale's role? Who was Nathan Hale? Nathan Hale was an overachiever. Nathan Hale had been an overachiever in everything that he'd done. He was good at everything. He was an excellent student. He was the best athlete, the best marksman, everything in his county. He had always been taught to be a success, be devoted. His parents were very devoted to their religion. He had been taught to be very devoted to his religion, even prayed with his students before leaving them. He was very devoted to everything he did. When the chance to serve in the Revolution came up, his devotion continued. He showed a lot of devotion to his nation by quitting his job, leaving immediately as a volunteer to volunteer for the brand new United States, which had not even declared its independence at that time. During this time, he served valiantly. He was loved by all the men he worked with. He was loved by his commanding officers. They respected him. On a day that he had a chance, what he thought to be useful, he volunteered for a special duty. He did it bravely, and obviously was not successful. He was able to infiltrate the British, but he was never able to make it back. A lot of people say that his death was a loss, a waste. No one really knew about it at the time. He was a junior officer, just another death in the Revolution. But it's those last words that are credited to him. I regret that I have but one life to lose for my country, which have made him go down in history as a true patriot, as a true revolutionary, as a true leader of the United States of America, as a martyr, as a hero. Those words that have been credited to him, whether he uttered him or not, whether he uttered those words or not, has given him his spot as the patriot he deserves to be. Thank you.